My director stood at the head of that boardroom and presented my entire proposal to the executive panel, slide by slide, word by word, number by number. He did it with such confidence that I almost believed it was his, almost. I had been in that room for 40 minutes, watching the man who had done this to me twice before take a standing ovation for work I had started in January and finished at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday in May. I sat in the back row with my coffee going cold, and I thought, not this time. What he didn't know was that I had already met with his client 3 weeks earlier, alone, and they had already offered me a job. I want to be clear about something before I tell you this story. I am not someone who complains. I am not someone who made noise, filed things, caused problems. For 5 years at that company, I was the person who stayed late when nobody asked, who picked up projects when they were about to fall apart, who trained 3 different junior hires, and watched 2 of them get promoted above me, because they were better at being visible than I was. My name is Maya. I was 31 when this happened. I had been a senior strategist at Calloway Group for 5 years and 4 months. My base salary was $74,000. I had been passed over for a director title twice. Both times I was told the same thing. Not quite the right moment. The budget's tight. We see you. We just need a little more time. I believed them. That's the part I'm most embarrassed about. I believed them. I had a master's in business strategy and 6 years of client work before Calloway, and I genuinely sat in those feedback meetings and nodded and said thank you and went back to my desk and worked harder. My director's name was Derek Holt. Derek had been at the company for 11 years. He was the kind of guy who remembered everyone's coffee order and forgot everyone's actual contributions. Charming in meetings, vague in private, completely unbothered by credit as long as it was going to him. I had watched Derek do this before. The first time was 8 months after I joined. I had rebuilt a client retention model that had been failing for 2 years. I spent 6 weeks on it. Derek presented it to leadership. He used the phrase, "my team's work," exactly once, in passing, and then spent the next 40 minutes using I and my and we built. I told myself it was normal. I told myself, this is how it goes at the director level. They present on behalf of their teams. It's not personal. The second time was the Brentley account. I had developed an entire market entry framework for a client trying to launch in Southeast Asia. Derek walked into that quarterly review with a printed deck I had made, with my name removed from the cover slide. I noticed. I said nothing. I told myself it was almost over. I was close to a promotion. I didn't want to rock anything. I also told myself, he won't do it again. He did it again. The Harmon Group pitch came up in February. Harmon was a $2.3 million contract, the biggest new business opportunity Calloway had seen in 3 years. They were a mid-sized logistics firm, looking to completely overhaul their brand positioning and market strategy, and they had put out a shortlist to 3 agencies. We were one of them. Derek announced in our team's stand-up that he would be leading the pitch. He said he had a strong vision for the approach. He said he needed the team's full support. What that meant in practice was that he wanted me to build it. He asked me directly, privately, to take point on the strategy deck. He said it in a way that felt like a compliment. You're the best person for this, Maya. Nobody else sees it the way you do. I know now that this is a sentence Derek said to whoever he needed something from. I heard later he'd said almost the same words to a guy named Marcus on the brand team, right before Marcus built the Kellerman rebrand, that Derek took to the industry conference with his own headshot on the case study. But in February, I said yes, because it was Harmon, because a win on a $2.3 million account was the kind of thing that moved careers forward, and I still believed, 5 years in, that eventually someone at that company would look at my work and connect it to me. I started building in January. I want you to understand what I mean when I say I built this. I'm not talking about slides. I built the entire strategic positioning framework. I ran primary research with 12 logistics industry contacts. I developed 3 distinct market entry scenarios with full financial modeling behind each one. I wrote the executive narrative, the competitive analysis, the implementation roadmap, the risk mitigation section. I built the deck, wrote the presenter notes, and then rebuilt the deck. When Derek said the opening was too dense, I worked an average of 11 hours a day for 4 months. I billed 63 hours in the last week alone, and somewhere around week 6, when Derek started scheduling alignment meetings to review my progress, without adding anything, when he started saying things like, "I've been thinking we should angle it this way," about ideas I had drafted 2 weeks earlier, when he started copying himself on my emails to the research vendors, I felt it. The familiar, cold feeling of watching someone position themselves over your work before the work was even finished. And this time, for the first time, I didn't look away. I started paying attention differently. I started noticing the specific moments. Derek inserted himself into the paper trail. He would reply to my client research emails and add one sentence, something generic, just to put his name in the thread. He started scheduling one-on-ones, where he would ask me to walk him through the deck, and then in the next team meeting would describe what I had walked him through as his own thinking. Once, in front of 3 other people, he said, "I've been working through this angle on the Harmon positioning. Let me share what I landed on." And then he described, nearly verbatim, a section I had written at 11 p.m. the night before and shared with him that morning. I watched the other people in the room nod. I watched one of them write it down, and I made a decision. I was not going to wait. I was not going to build the whole thing, watch it get presented under someone else's name, get a great job in a follow-up email, and go back to my desk and tell myself next time would be different. I knew exactly what was going to happen, because I had watched it happen, and I had let it happen, not again. I had a contact at Harmon. Her name was Claire Sutton, and she was VP of Strategy there. I had met her 3 years earlier at an industry conference, and we'd kept in loose contact, occasional emails, a coffee when she was in the city once. She was the internal champion on the Harmon side, pushing for this agency review. I emailed Claire and asked if she had 30 minutes for a call, professional, direct, no alarm bells. She said yes. We got on a call on a Thursday evening. I want to be precise about what I said. I didn't badmouth Derek. I didn't say my company is a mess. My boss is a thief. Please rescue me. I said, "Claire, I want to be transparent with you, because I respect you, and I think you deserve to know what you're actually evaluating. The strategy you're going to see presented was built by me. Every framework, every scenario, every number in the financial model, that's my work. I'm telling you this not to create a problem, but because I think it matters when you're choosing who you want to actually work with. I won't be in the room. The person presenting it will be my director, and I want you to know that if something doesn't land the way you expected, or if you have questions the presenter can't answer, that's why." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maya, I had a feeling something like this was going on. You built all of it?" I said yes. She asked me 3 strategy questions, off the top of her head, deep questions about the competitive positioning and the risk scenario I'd modeled for their southeast corridor. I answered all 3 immediately, with specifics. She said, "Can I ask you something honestly?" I said yes. She said, "Would you ever consider coming in-house? Because what you just described to me in 10 minutes is more clarity than we've gotten from 3 agency pitches combined." I said, "Tell me more about that." We had 2 more calls after that. I did not tell anyone at Calloway. I showed up to work every day. I answered Derek's alignment meeting invitations. I walked him through the deck one more time, in the 2nd week of April, while a job offer was sitting in my personal inbox that I hadn't opened yet. I wanted to see the whole thing through. I needed to see it. Claire and I had agreed she would let the pitch process play out. She would let Derek present, and then she would make her decision. The pitch was scheduled for May 14th. I was not presenting. Of course I was not presenting. Derek had framed this as senior leadership only in the room. I was told I could watch via video feed if I wanted. I was in the back of the room. There were 14 people on the Harmon side. Claire was seated 3 chairs from the head of the table. Derek walked in at 9 on the dot, dressed like he'd been preparing for this his entire career. He thanked everyone for their time. He pulled up the first slide. "My first slide," he said. What we've built for you here is a framework I've been developing for the logistics sector for several years. I took a sip of my coffee. He went through it slide by slide. He delivered my presenter notes, almost verbatim in some places. The financial model, the 3 scenarios, the Southeast Corridor risk matrix, all of it with the fluency of a man who had written it. At one point, one of the Harmon executives asked a clarifying question about the assumptions behind Scenario B. Derek paused, a half-second too long. He said, "That's a great question. The model was built to flex across a few inputs. What specifically were you curious about?" Which is a sentence that means, I don't know the answer. I watched Claire look at the table for exactly 1 second, then look back up. At the end of the presentation, the room applauded. Someone said it was the strongest pitch they'd seen. Derek smiled like he'd been waiting his whole life for that sentence. I packed up my laptop bag, and I left the building, and I called Claire from the parking garage. She picked up on the second ring. She said, "I have a few questions your director couldn't answer. Do you have time?" I said, "I have all the time in the world." I accepted the offer from Harmon Group on May 19th. Director of Strategy, $112,000 base, plus a performance bonus structure that my previous salary couldn't have touched. I gave my 2 weeks' notice on a Monday morning. I went to HR, not to Derek, because I didn't owe Derek a conversation. I wrote a professional resignation letter that said nothing beyond the standard language. I returned my laptop. I forwarded my personal files to myself. I thanked the people I actually liked, and I said nothing to the people I didn't. Derek found out, the way everyone at that company found out everything, through the rumor channel. Before the official announcement, he came to my desk on my second-to-last day. He said, "I heard you're leaving. Where are you going?" I said, "Harmon Group." There was a pause, a very specific pause, the kind that happens when a piece of information arrives before the brain is ready for it. He said, "Harmon. Like the Harmon Group, the client we just..." I said, "Yep." He said, "As what?" I said, "Director of Strategy." He didn't say anything else. He walked back to his office and closed the door. I finished my coffee. Harmon brought Calloway on as their agency of record on June 3rd. The contract was signed. Derek had his win. He sent the team a celebratory email with the subject line, "We did it." I was no longer on the team. I was now on the client side, which meant that Derek Holt, my former director, the man who had presented my work as his own for 5 years, was now going to need to present to me. The first account review was scheduled for July 11th. I arrived at the Harmon conference room at 8:45. I had reviewed the prep materials the night before. I knew the agenda. I set up my laptop at the head of the table, because that was my seat, that was my room. The Calloway team arrived at 9. Derek walked in first. He was mid-sentence, talking to one of his account managers. That same practiced confidence, that same room-owning walk. He looked up. He saw me, and for a moment, just a moment, his face did something I had never seen it do. It went blank. Not surprised, exactly. More like a man who has just understood something he should have understood a long time ago. I said, "Derek, good to see you. Go ahead and take a seat." He sat down. He opened his notebook. He did not make eye contact with me. For the first 10 minutes, I ran that meeting exactly the way I ran every meeting, prepared, specific, direct. I asked 3 questions about the implementation timeline that Derek could not answer off the top of his head. He had to check with his account manager twice. After the meeting, one of my Harmon colleagues leaned over and said, "Is it just me, or does that guy seem like he's winging it?" I said, "It's not just you." Calloway lost the Harmon account 14 months later, not because of me. I want to be clear about that. I didn't torpedo it. I didn't go looking for reasons to pull the contract. They lost it because Derek genuinely did not understand the work well enough to execute it. Quarter after quarter, the deliverables came back thin. The strategic thinking was surface level, and when it came time to evolve the framework, for year 2, he had nothing. Because you can present someone else's thinking, you cannot continue it. My VP told me afterward that the Calloway team had struggled to answer basic questions about their own strategy from the first review onward. I said, "That's unfortunate," and I meant it in the most honest way I know how. I don't actually want anyone to fail. I just stopped being the reason they didn't. I think about those 5 years a lot, not with anger. The anger burned off. somewhere in the parking garage, after the pitch, when I was already dialing Claire. I think about the version of me who sat in those feedback meetings and said thank you and believed the part about not quite the right moment. I wasted a lot of not quite the right moments on people who were never going to give me mine. The thing about someone like Derek is that he's not even a villain in his own story. He genuinely believes that managing people who are smarter than him is the same as being smarter than them. He'll find someone else. He'll walk someone else through a deck, call it alignment, remove their name from the cover slide, and present it with that same smile. And eventually, that person will do what I did, or they won't, and they'll spend 5 more years in a back row somewhere, watching their work get a standing ovation with the wrong name on it. I sat at the head of a table I built my way to. Nobody handed me that room. Nobody gave me Derek's face when he walked in and saw me. I made that brick by brick, draft by draft. 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, when nobody was watching. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I am extremely, specifically, unreservedly fine. They promoted the wrong person. The right one just went somewhere that noticed.